Welcome to that F1 show. My name's Alan Clark. Sorry if I just shouted in your ear. I'll bring my voice down a little bit. How you doing, Roger? Azerbaijan Grand Prix lived up to
Yeah,
expectation.
doing good. Yes, in some ways, it definitely has. It was I think to be honest, I thought it was going to be slightly more eventful as a Grand Prix normally is, but obviously there were events that happened throughout the Grand Prix, but it was yeah, heartbreaking in some sense, good in others, which we'll come on to talk about.
Yeah, definitely. I suppose for me, the sign of a good Grand Prix is that you sort of just at
Haven't
one
fallen
point.
asleep.
Well, yeah, absolutely. But all of a sudden, it feels like there's only 3 laps to go. You haven't been looking at the clock or too much happening on the screen, like at the information tabs, because there's enough to view
That's true.
actually what the cameras are showing. So for me, it was like, I think it was when they were talking about the Norris and Ricardo. Will they allow Norris to pass to try? I looked up and then saw there was only like 8 laps to go, and I was like, oh, there's no, like, if he's 3 seconds behind, there's no way he's going to catch Alonso. But I was so engrossed to an extent in what was going on that you didn't realize the time ticking by. So for
Yeah,
me, that's a good Grand Prix. And as far as this season's gone, and especially the last few races, that was sort of a good entertaining watch.
it's true. I'd say there are. I think a lot of people, whenever they watch Formula One, especially in years gone by, would say that sometimes in the afternoon it's a nice time to have a nap. They love watching the start, they love watching the pit stops, and then you have to see obviously who finishes. And there were seasons whenever you could actually go for a 20 lap sleep and wake up and everything's still the same. So that's why I was just joking around.
Yeah.
It's a good Grand Prix because you didn't fall asleep. But I think
Well, that's
every
that's how I got into Formula One. It was my, like, back when I used to go out, like, sort of when I was like 17, 18. Like, it was my Sundays crashed on the sofa, and I would just doze in and out and watch the start, just like you said. And
yeah,
then I'd just doze in and out. You'd maybe wake up, open your eyes for a second, see if anything had changed, and fall back. It was
or be
great. It
woken
was,
up by the commentary whenever they get excited because something's happening. That wakes you up and you're like, oh, what is it?
yeah.
But it's
You see someone stepping out of a car and wondering what on earth happened.
yeah. So today early on in the race, Carlos Sainz getting out of the car, that was for me a sad moment. I was like, and we spoke last week. The podcast was all on, well, most of it was on Carlos Sainz and his unfortunate season so far, and is he good enough to have the Ferrari seat? So straight away, lap 10, again, I felt for him. First of all, I think like some of the commentators, they thought he had just made a mistake and run off. But then obviously with the replay, we quickly found out that it was
Yeah. Even before they
a
said
car
it was
issue,
yeah, they said, I think it was like a hydraulic issue.
hydraulic. Yeah,
But even before they said that, they showed the replay and you just hear like a snap,
yeah.
and he just goes straight on. So it's not a question of whether Carlos Sainz is good enough for Ferrari, but whether Ferrari are good enough for Carlos Sainz.
Yeah, it's true.
He
It's
he
true, but
deserves better.
yeah. Before we just get on to the race, jumping back to Friday and Saturday, I'm not sure if you looked too much into the results and what was happening, but what I've been so excited about over the last few weeks is the rise of Sergio Perez and how well he's been doing this season compared to last season. And it even seemed like even in free practice one, two, three, and even whenever you look at qualifying, he has been probably above Verstappen, his teammate, in each of the sessions, and he really has been going for it. Obviously, signed a new contract as well during the week, or at Monaco, just after Monaco, or before Monaco. And in that, he just seems like he's got a new lease of life. And before this race, I was looking at it, and there's 15 points. He was third, but he was only 15 points behind Max.
Verstappen.
And at the start of the race, whenever, well, obviously after the corner one, he was first, Verstappen was third. At that point, if he had set a fastest lap and it had stayed like that, there would have been 4 points in it. I was like, this is so good, just for the championship and this battle, this rivalry that I would love to see between him and Max. And then obviously with everything that happened throughout the race, which we can chat about, I was just like, I wonder, will team orders come into this? It's only race 8, all this stuff, but we can come on to that. But yes, so I had a good friend text me, PK was texting me as well. He's just saying how he just loves Perez. He's been, ever since getting back in Formula One, he's been his favorite. And he's just saying how it's so good. And then I was with some friends last night. They were saying the exact same thing. So it seems to be this thing where people are, anyway, who I've been speaking to, they're loving the Perez is actually getting up there and can start to rival Max, and it's not just the Max and Red Bull show, and someone else has to do their best to help him out. So
Well, I
hopefully
suppose
that
from
continues.
a well, I suppose I was about to say from a newcomer's point of view, but that's quite unfair, because everyone probably who watched last season and who's followed the last couple of seasons probably thinks Red Bull and Max, or especially and Christian Horner, are just a bit whiny at times, a bit sort of you can't do that to me. Blah, blah, blah. So I suppose it's good to see that Perez isn't just playing second fiddle anymore. He's not like he seems to want it and seems to
Yeah,
know now that he's good
yeah,
enough to take it.
yeah,
Obviously, things didn't necessarily work out for him today, in that matter. But yeah, like it would be great to see, because obviously, like Vettel and Mark Webber had that sort of relationship.
yeah.
Vettel was
They did.
champion. Mark Webber is like the steadfast number two. Like he's the vet, and well, Vettel just didn't give. Like Mark Webber was sort of probably too kind, maybe in the years before, where it was like, no, it's fair enough. Team orders, Vettel's ahead. And when it came to, there was that famous race where Red Bull team orders where Vettel
Yeah,
don't let Mark win the race, and Vettel comes,
yeah.
takes him over and wins.
Not
So
bad
it
for
seems to
number
be,
two driver. Not
yeah,
bad.
exactly.
It's great.
So it seems to be that could very easily happen again here. Like
Yeah,
obviously they pay Max the big money, so do they want Perez to win? When I suppose, do they care? That I suppose that's, does Red Bull care? I suppose if they, sorry, I'm getting my thoughts mixed up. My thoughts was they pay Max the money, they want him to win. Then I sort of
yeah,
backtracked and it's like, well, does it really matter to them? But yes, they want Max, who they pay the big bucks, to stay. And if they
yes,
don't treat him as the number one driver and give him the favor,
yeah,
then will he stay? And they'll lose
yeah,
all that money. So
yeah.
yeah, oh,
He,
it's great.
yeah, it is. It is. So just good to see, and something that I think that even in today's race, I'm sure everyone, if you're listening now, you know the race results, but that was not a good day for. I was going to say it's not a good day for Ferrari, but as a complete whole in Formula One, like the Ferrari power unit as a whole, um, it just wasn't good with the two Ferraris not finishing the race, and Alfa Romeo and Haas as well. So it's funny. I seen on Instagram there was one of those little. I'm not sure if you've ever seen. Well, you have kids, Alan, so I'm pretty sure you've seen it. Seen Cars 2, where there's
Have
that
I
one
seen
where
Cars 2?
yeah,
Cars 2 is played about 6 times a day in my house in some shape or form.
yeah.
It is
So
Fred's favourite movie.
there's that part where the camera is like this laser beam that causes the cars to crash or take them out of the race. So someone put this up today of like this camera looking down, taking out each Ferrari power unit. So
That's
it
great.
was very, very, very well done. And still heartbreaking for me at the time. Seeing it, I couldn't believe it. See when like even I was just excited to see what was going to happen because they had brought
Because of the pit stops.
McLaren, yeah, they had brought him in as okay, this is good. There's a good gap here. Strategy wise, what's going to happen? The chances of another safety car are high, or a virtual safety car are high. So that could then, if there's still a good enough gap, Leclerc could get a set of softs on or mediums again, and this could be a proper good
Yeah.
fight. So I
So
was excited for that.
just to add context to that, then I'm sure most people who listen to this have watched the race or at least watched highlights. But they say on a safety car, was it you lose? Is it just it's over 20 seconds,
Yeah,
but you only lose 10 seconds? Was it on a virtual safety car, which is when there's a crash and you have to go at 40% of your speed around the track. So you can come in and pit and not lose as much time as if regular pits. So Leclerc came in, but Red Bull stayed out, which meant they didn't. If Leclerc could hang in there, he could potentially gain 10 seconds on the Red Bulls, which is almost what he lost during that time. So that was when Leclerc when his engine failed. I was gutted for that, because it was sort of playing out. You're like, how will this go? Especially because they made a deal. The commentators made a deal of Red Bull being on the exact same strategy. Mm-hmm. So if it didn't work for one, it wasn't going to work for either. Yep. As opposed to maybe bringing Perez in so they can cover off one way or another. But unfortunately, we were denied that.
Yeah. What's your thoughts, Alan, on, you've seen the quote as the Red Bulls were going down the main straight, no fighting? Do you see that as there's been more played in the radio, like as in Max is coming through, no fighting, or just you can race, but just don't get caught up in each other? What do you think?
I took that at the time. Like, you could overthink things and like easily dig into Red Bull's communication. But yeah, no, at the time I took that as number one rule in Formula One is don't take out your teammate. So Max is coming up on Perez with DRS. Perez, don't fight him because you may risk crashing. So let Max through. But that's as far as for me, that's where that message stopped. If, say, a lap later Perez was in the same position, maybe I'm naive here, but I would have thought Max potentially would have understood the same message, but maybe not. What do you think?
So I think it was slightly more team orders than we know, and we've been heard. First of all, we know that Perez had a decent pace. And it was like, you've seen that Verstappen struggled to get past Leclerc, who was slower. So for Verstappen to catch Perez that quickly and get past him that easily, whereas Leclerc was able to hold Max off every time going down that straight and everything. Yeah. So for the only thing for us to have been allowed to hear was no fighting. If they're allowing them to race, you would say no fighting to the person behind, because the person in front is allowed to defend. So you then give the person who is coming up behind that thing of like, don't get into a fight, or don't try and squabble here. So it's just interesting it came up on Perez's radio and not Max's. But we're not sure. Maybe that's just reading too much into it.
Yeah, no, it's fair.
So, yeah.
Yeah, no, it's like.
Did that cut off, Alan?
Your voice is fine. Your video, so wee bit stop start, but your voice is fine. Yeah, no, I could easily believe that. It wouldn't take much to make me believe that it's just Red Bull team orders. Like, you can obviously see why.
Yeah.
Yeah, it'll be fascinating to know or see how much Drive to Survive shows. Yes. But obviously, I'm sure the teams have a say to an extent on what's shown there. So maybe not. But so just on that, is it not surely the broadcaster or the FI? Like, it's out of Red Bull's hands what we hear on the TV.
I'm not sure. Yeah, I'm not sure who's the one who decides what is allowed to be shown or not. It'd be great to try and find out. Like, I don't know, like, because obviously broadcasting wise as a whole, broadcast it. I know some people get different things, so it must be Formula One. I'm guessing, like, obviously it's Sky, Channel 4 here in the UK. They both show the same thing. They both have the same footage. Yes, different commentators, but if you're on holiday somewhere, say you're in Spain, or if you're in Italy and you're still watching it on one of their channels, it's all the same footage, things shown. So it must be within. But I'm not sure if each team.
So I reckon then, based on that, I'd reckon that's the complete order was just no fighting. Because you don't, in that situation, they've talked about this scenario probably all week and all season, I don't think you need to elaborate more on that. I don't think you
Yeah.
need to be like, okay, Sergio, here's what's happening, blah 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 blah, because he
Yeah.
knows. So it's just
Yeah.
he's perfectly aware Max is coming up, and they're just like, no fighting,
Yeah.
and that's a lot
So
more. It sounds a lot more like passive than do not stop him
yeah.
or
Yeah. And on that then, so I first of all, I feel for Perez in those moments. The other person I really felt for today was Daniel Ricciardo. Like, ah, so him and Norris, two totally different strategies. One started on hards, one started on medium. So Ricardo, for those of you who might not have seen, he started on hards, and Norris was going on medium. So Norris was going by the tire compound, should have pit it first, and did put it first, but you know that the mediums dropped off, and Ricardo has so much more pace, so they should have let him through, um, and keep going. But because of the safety car and Norris didn't come in at the virtual safety car time whenever everyone else did, he stayed out to try and get past Alonso because Alonso did pit. So the team radio message was, we've got to let Norris do his thing because we need to try and get out ahead of Alonso at the time of pit stops.
this was after Ricardo telling McLaren to let Ricardo
Yes,
like tell
let him
Norris
through.
to let me through.
Yeah, because Gasly was right behind him with DRS, ready to get past me. He's just like, guys, Gasly's going to get me if you don't let me go. So whenever they came back with that radio message, he's just like, guys, this is just so. From that point on, I was watching this. I just hope Ricardo beats him. Like I've nothing against Norris at all, but I just think in this part of the season with Daniel not having a contract and his form not being that great, I just thought now is a good time for the team just to give him a little bit of confidence. And you know what, you go. So let's see what you can do. Show us. And they
Absolutely.
just did, they just didn't give him that. So whenever, and then the funny thing was, whenever Norris did come into pit, he came out. He was nowhere near. Like he was 5 places away from Alonso. He was nowhere near him. So
Yeah.
it's not even like it. Just tactically wise, it just didn't make sense. And then we then had what you mentioned at the beginning, this battle between uh, Alonso, Ricardo, and Norris at that point. Whenever the race panned out, and they were then closer towards the end of the race, but I'm glad. I'm glad it finished in the way that it did, which was Ricardo being ahead. But you can see even to the last lap that Norris was pushing him and just wanting to get ahead. But it's good for Ricardo. He's a we know he's a good driver. I would say yes. Anyway, I'll come on to it another week. I'm just talking about world champions. If I just thinking that, sorry, I'll mess up. If there's someone who you think could have been a world champion at some point, I think it could have been him whenever he was in his Red Bull days. If they had the car now, I think he really was and is
Yeah.
a great driver.
Yeah. No, absolutely. If he'd stayed at Red Bull, I
But
wonder what
yeah,
his
and
career.
even whenever Mercedes were so dominant for those 8 years, like whenever if it was a little bit closer, I think he really could have when he was like his as he said, he is one of the best people at braking late. And in Formula One, if you can brake late, you've always got a chance at
Yeah.
overtaking everything. So, but yes. Anything else that you think around the McLarens today? Or
No, just as much like I completely am with you on the sympathy for Ricardo. He wasn't treated well today. At the same time, I was hoping that Norris would just screw team orders and go for him on the
oh yeah,
last couple of laps. So to sort of pull that story on, um, yeah. So it's Alonso, Ricardo, Norris towards the end. Ricardo wants to take over Alonso, obviously, but Norris is coming up on him and is like, "Let me past." And they're like, McLaren come to him and say, "No, we think Ricardo can get him. He's just trying to push. Sit where you are." And then it sort of plays out to a point where they then say, and it's funny actually because the commentators said this first, and then McLaren came on and told Norris, they were like, "So Ricardo's going to push, and if he doesn't close up, he's going to let you through so you can try and get Alonso, and if you can't, at the last lap, we're going to swap you back so that Ricardo can finish first or finish ahead of you,"
yeah,
which just seemed like when you get to that level, it's not good for a
yeah.
team.
Yeah.
Like, because at that point you're just like, no, we want to keep, like, as much as Ricardo needs a confidence boost, I don't think that's going to give him it. I don't
No.
think if he gets a win over his teammate by just sheer, like,
Yeah.
splitting it down the middle, it's your turn.
Yeah.
Like, I just, I
And
don't think that
even at
reflected
that,
well on Formula One. And Norris was like, okay, yeah, like you could picture his face, just
yeah.
just rolling his eyes. He's like,
Yeah.
fine.
And I do agree with Norris as well towards the end whenever they're like, oh no, we need this for the team. He's just like, this isn't for the team, this is just for position. Like, no matter what, the two of them, one would have been, where did they finish? Eighth and ninth or something like that. So one would have been eighth and one would have been ninth. Let the two of them fight the last two laps.
Yeah,
It's like they're both going to get that place. It's not like anyone was too far in front or behind for them to get mixed up in this and then to lose more points.
exactly.
So
And
for
on,
for a sport, and even the thing is that each team knows that the more they are seen, the more the sponsors are seen in the car. So the more you can do and get on camera, it's even better for the team. So hold
absolutely.
that, have a good race, go for it.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. So yeah, I wasn't happy. It just wasn't a good look for McLaren. They want to be competing.
Yeah,
If they ever want to compete, they got to compete. Like, that's the opposite of competition.
yeah,
What they did today.
yeah,
So yeah, it wasn't a good look. I think they have a bit to go.
yeah,
Um, and I think I'm wondering, obviously, what's caused a lot of this riff is Zach Brown a couple of weeks ago, the McLaren CEO, hinting that there's clauses in the contract with Ricardo that could the contract end early if performance isn't matched to their expect. Did you see that? No.
No, I
Oh,
haven't
did you
seen
not?
this. No.
Let me get this. Let me get this up on Instagram. So yeah, what?
As in they could get rid of
So,
him if
so
he
Zach,
wasn't performing.
yeah. So
Who would you
this
bring
guy,
in? Like
I know, I
maybe
know. Well, I suppose just, yeah, reserve drivers
Gasly?
or
I'd say Gasly would go for that seat. Like that would, well, you think McLaren's push and hope for a future would be to get back on top? Will AlphaTauri ever go past Red Bull? Nope.
yeah.
So
So
that would be a good.
this was, I think, was it after, it was before qualifying at Monaco, I think it was. Um, yeah, Zach Brown was talking to just Sky Sports, and he says, I don't want to get into the contract, but there are mechanisms in which we are committed to each other and mechanisms in which we are not.
Okay, wow.
Which is then, like, so sorry, I don't know how you missed it, because then they talked about it quite a bit and it was all over Instagram. But
Okay.
obviously the Sky Sports pundit saying, for a driver who's lacking confidence, for the
Yeah,
CEO to come out and talk about his
yeah,
contract like that, that's that's terrible. And then
yeah,
Ricardo was interviewed about it, I think just pre-race maybe, and he's just
yeah.
like, look, I'm not performing. Like, he sort of just took it on the chin and was like,
So
look,
I came in at this bit, but hadn't heard that pre story
okay,
part.
yeah,
So thanks for filling the context on that. It's
yeah, no
good to
worries.
know.
So I'm bringing this up because of how I feel McLaren aren't performing well, just not like off the racetrack as well. But I think part of it is maybe the showmanship of Zach Brown as a leader.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah,
I think you make quotes like that when you're just thinking of stuff to say.
okay, yeah.
Like, I think he enjoys the TV too much and being on screen.
Do you also think that he is too spread out across different motorsports? Maybe something we can talk
I,
about
I thought you were
on.
going to say his waistline, but yeah. Sorry, that's terrible.
Uh,
Across too many motorsports. No, does he run all of McLaren? As in, I suppose he's
yeah,
CEO of
so if you
McLaren, so
look, yeah,
he's across Le
yeah,
Mans and everything.
yeah. So even if you go and have a look on his Instagram, like he will be fully talking about each thing, and he'll go on and mention them even within the IndyCar stuff and everything. He's fully
Oh, okay.
engaged in all of it. Whereas I think as a team principal, you want to be like, I am here, I am focused on this is my two drivers, these are my cars.
But that's the thing. He's not team principal.
He's not, oh yeah, your other guy is, of course.
Yes, yeah, yeah. But he's just obviously involved. He's just everywhere.
Yeah,
So that's what I think almost creates, like, because who's the
Yeah,
thing with like Toto
I
Wolff.
get
No,
you.
Toto Wolff also owns part of the team, so maybe he's there. Maybe he's not CEO, but he's there as team principal and does his team principal job,
Yeah,
like
yeah,
on race day. Whereas Zach Brown, like when you've got your team principal who's giving you orders and Zach Brown who's your boss, who, like, there's surely going to be a conflict there of team principal says one thing, your CEO's telling you to do another, or wants your time here where the team principal wants your time there.
yeah,
Like, at the same time, Zach Brown's done a lot for McLaren in terms of bringing a huge audience from America, I'm sure, and like he's very charismatic on camera, so that does have its
yeah,
benefits.
yeah. It's
But
true.
I think there's a few sort of kinks starting to show in the armor.
Yeah.
But yeah, enough about McLaren. um,
More about you now, Alan. Let's before we do our Ask Alan question, let's jump into the Roger versus Alan, which is
oh,
something that you're not going to want to chat about.
no. If anyone
Because it
follows
links
us on
so
Instagram, I think I put my feelings out there too much. If you watch their
yeah.
stories.
So we done our pick for Roger versus Alan this week on Instagram stories where we weren't together. So we were just I picked someone, you picked someone, and I went with Sebastian Vettel this week. I had to pick first. It was my week to pick first. Went with him because looking at his track record at Baku, he has always done so well. So I thought he's pretty consistent. He's not going to make silly mistakes. He's hopefully not going to crash, and the car seems to be quite reliable. It's not going to push for the podium, but he has ended up in a podium at Baku before because he's just been there. So that's why I went with him. Then in the next story, you put up that you went for Yuki Tsunoda, and I was like, oh no, because I know they've got pace. And at that point, I was like, this is a good call. But then my reply was a little bit of a fight and talk saying, nah, Vettel's got this. And then, as you know, going into the first corner and the first lap of the race, what happened, Alan? Tsunoda
Uh,
was eighth and Vettel was ninth at the start. And
yeah,
then
after the first lap, it was the other way around. Vettel 8th, Tsunoda 9th.
so I
And
was
then
watching
Vettel
it, I was
got
just like, this is great. This is so good. I texted you, and obviously you had just put up on the Instagram stories as well, being like, I can't believe this because it was 4-1. I was like, this lead is starting to. If this turns 5-1, that's a lead. But one of us just has to get the 10 to win. So, technically,
yeah, I suppose 11's a draw, isn't it? So yeah, 10
well,
you can't lose.
yeah, 10 you can't lose, of course. So in that, but then I was texting you, which obviously people won't know. We didn't do this a story. I was texting you. I was just like, Vettel's just so good in this track. Like he's gonna do well here. He's gonna push. At that moment when I hit send is when he just went straight. I was like, oh no, I spoke too soon. But he'd done that incredible, quick little, like just spun it round and got straight back out, but got straight back out behind Sonoda.
I
And
know at that
then,
point I was so worried that he
yes,
was just going to go straight on the track, and because
yeah,
he knows our competition's happening, so I thought he was just going to take
of course,
Tsunoda out.
of course. Did you
But no,
see? Sorry, this is actually pretty recent because I just put. Did you see the story I just put up on Instagram there tonight? It's of Vettel looking at his phone.
no,
So
yeah, I'll look it up here.
you'll see it if you're on social media. Go have a look at our stories. Obviously they only last within 24 hours. So if you're listen to this on Monday, go have a look. You will see that Vettel loves Roger versus Allen so much that he is actually checking to see who won today. So it was great.
Nice.
No, so at that point, then Sonoda started to pull out a lead, and I was like, okay, Alan's got this. I was like, fair play. It's going to be 4-2, good bit of rivalry. And then, like, how often does this happen? How often does a rear wing split in half?
I know.
Couldn't
Well,
believe it.
I've never seen it.
Yeah. So it's whenever he's in a DRS straight, that's whenever we've seen it on the camera. So one half
Hmm.
was open and the other half was just shut for anyone who hasn't seen. So it's just that then so I thought, okay, they might just be able to not use DRS, but then it's the
That,
commentators who were
yeah.
saying he's going to either have to retire the car or they need to fix this. But
Well,
they were
they
talking
thought
like
just retire
retire.
the car. Yeah, there's no way around it.
Yeah.
So,
So then that's whenever I text you again. I feel for you in this.
oh, it was just going my way, and then was just
It was.
ripped from me.
It was. So if you're watching this on YouTube, you will see that I edit Alan's name at the start of this. We normally have Roger and Alan at the bottom. For
Yeah,
those of you who aren't able to watch, it says, I lost Roger again. It's now 5-1.
it doesn't anymore.
Have you just changed it?
Yeah.
Yeah, you have. So yeah, but Alan, thanks anyway for choosing the Aston Martin, kind of a green thing to wear as well, just to support the win today.
No worries.
Mr. F1.
Um,
It's great.
it was a tough watch. Because like you mentioned, I think last week or maybe it was at Monaco, that if you look at this our scoreboard on our Instagram posts that you do, most of my picks are at the bottom half of the table.
Yeah.
Meaning, really, although some of yours should have a lead. So this was one of the ones that it was like, this is close, this could decide it. It's like if we both picked Verstappen and Perez in the same week, it's a decider.
Yeah.
So this one will have an important bearing on the rest of the competition.
It's true. And the thing is, that is going to come. That's when, once you pick someone like that, I'm going to have to try. And I would say, if you're listening to this and you've got a friend who's into Formula One, there's times, so the TV cameras show so much of the front of the grid, like those who are pushing for the win, and you very rarely look down the grid to see what's happening. But I would say this is one of those things. I'm not sure if you're the same, Alan.
Absolutely.
It spices the race up a lot more. As a Ferrari fan, when the two Ferraris were out, normally I'd be like, I don't even care. Like I just love Ferrari. So whenever they're not in the race, I'm like, what's the point of watching this now? And it's heartbreak. The more and more this goes on, but then straight away I was just like, do you know what? I don't really mind. Like this is, I need to see where Vettel's going to finish. So it's good. So I highly recommend. I know it's probably too late in the season to do it now, but next season, whenever it begins, I'd recommend giving this a go with friends.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Well, what we did was, since we did it at the start of the season, well, we actually did it, I think, 3 races in or 2 races in. So we are able to use all the drivers, but if you wanted to do this with a friend, that was race 8, race 7?
8. Yeah.
Race 8.
Race 8.
So there are 14 races to go. So
Yeah.
just top 14 as it stands.
True.
Use them and just pick one each week.
Yeah.
But I completely agree. That's probably one of the main reasons behind how I started the show, in that this just kept going, but because it was such a good race for me because I wasn't aware of the time or the laps left. I was just so engrossed in what was happening. But that's probably a huge factor behind that, is because I was watching for so many other things as well, including Tsunoda and Vettel.
So next week's Grand Prix is in Canada, the Canadian Grand Prix in Montreal. I really love this track. So, but this leads me on to the Ask Alan for this week. So, question Formula One, completely Formula One related, which I don't think we've done. We've done a location place, but for you, street track or open track, normal race track, what do you prefer?
Ooh. It's a good question. If you'd asked me after Monaco, I would have probably said like racetrack, but Azerbaijan, I think, is becoming probably one of my favorite, if not my favorite race of the season, which is obviously a street track. And I always loved the Singapore Grand Prix at night. But again, there's just no. I'd probably go choosing one of the two, racetrack. I think if you ask me to choose sort of my two favorite, don't ask me now, but my 2 or 3 favorite racetracks or races on the calendar, Baku would be up there. Therefore, it's not as simple as just saying street or proper circuit. But probably a proper circuit, because like things like Spa and the fact that there's just so much, there is like overtaking. It's commonplace on like racetracks that are designed for it. And I think the gravel adds, like, although the barrier just takes you out, but if there's grass and gravel, maybe not so much gravel, you can make a mistake. Yeah, exactly. But you can make a mistake and get back into it. But big fan of so that's my answer to that. But coming on to Canada, one of my favorite races ever.
You do a really good Canadian accent, Alan, don't you? Do you remember? Never.
Oh, I don't know what you're talking about, Roger. That was shocking. I'm so sorry. I spent. Yeah. No.
Love
Uh,
it. Thanks for doing that. That is
I can
big
do a bit of
smile
it, like
moment
like every person from the UK tries an American accent. I can do a bit of a Southern draw, but I can't do an American accent. All right, I can't do a Canadian accent. Yeah, apologies for everyone for that last 30 seconds. But Canada, Jenson Button coming from last in the rain to win is one of my phenomenal.
Well,
Canada's a good track.
we also had that moment a few years ago with Sebastian and Lewis, whenever Sebastian just missed the corner, went over the grass and came back on, and that's whenever that's again for first and second, and then the FIA were like, no, you've got to give that up, and he's just like, I can't believe this, and we've got that famous thing of him taking the one from Lewis's car and putting it in front of where his car should have been.
Oh, of course.
Do you remember that? That was only what, 3 years ago? Like, and it was just like that. If you go back now and have a look at the decisions that have been made by the FIA in recent times, go have a look at that. There's no way that he coming off grass down a hill could have done anything else. Like, and I think if you ask Lewis now, Lewis would say that was a harsh thing. But we can talk about that. We'll talk about that after. We'll put that into the Canadian Grand Prix, I'm sure. There will be plenty of talk around that this week.
Absolutely, and there'll also be plenty of talk around probably last thing before we end. But Lewis Hamilton today. If anyone watched sort of post race, I know some people maybe just checkered flag and turn it off. But if you saw Lewis Hamilton getting out of his car after, did you see that?
Out of his car. Yeah.
He's struggling to get out of his car. I suppose he's, as far as F1 goes, he's a no AP. So maybe that's just par for the course. But Hamilton complaining throughout the race about how his back is killing him, and that's because of the bouncing and the porpoising. Yeah. If you think how close they are to the ground, he's potentially just hitting concrete or like what probably at least feels like concrete to him at high speeds. Yeah. So he's really struggled with that today and really struggled to get out of his car.
Yeah. Did you see Toto Wolff's comments and that there's a chance that he's concerned he might not make next week's Grand Prix?
I didn't see that, but the commentators on Sky were saying that with a week to go, they've got their work cut out for him to get him fit.
Because he's in a car. If you think he's in a car again in 5 days, like properly trying to put times in. Yeah. So it's
while being on an airplane for 5 hours stiff.
Probably having to do maybe some simulator work as well. It's tough going. That is tough. Yeah. And you even heard it today whenever they were like you heard the whole way down. Yeah.
Absolutely. So obviously the porpoising is at its worst on fast straights, and there's 2 very long fast straights. If not, is it 2? There's 2 very long, if not. There's 3 sort of long straights. 2 after, like separated by just a chicane. So that if he makes it, will just be as big a problem because there's no way they can bring in unless they just lift the car up and suffer pace as a result. That could be a big factor next week. And actually Russell was interviewed and said that he's deeply concerned that porpoising and those bouncing will lead to a very dangerous crash. Because obviously it's not just like their vision will be wobbly. Like if you shake your head and try and look, or just like nod fast and try and look, like it's blurred. Try going 210 miles an hour doing that, and having to, because the big point they're talking about is that they'll have braking zone markers, but if your vision's blurry and you can't hit that braking zone at the right time, it could be pretty significant.
Yeah.
So Russell came out and sort of damned that, which is really a damning comment on your own team, because it's them
Yeah.
you're suffering. So it's like,
Yeah.
my team could cause some serious issues here. So,
Yeah.
and Mercedes know, like Toto Wolff was straight on after the race and saying, Lewis, we're sorry. We'll have to work on that. And Lewis was very kind. He's just like, thanks, yes, but great performance today, blah, blah, blah. But yeah, that'll be, I'm sure, quite a big talking point leading in to the Canadian Grand Prix next week.
Yeah.
So yeah, that'll do. I think that'll do us. Thanks for listening, all of you who've made it this far. And as ever, we are on all social media platforms at That F1 Show, and we'd really appreciate it if you just dropped us a comment at some point, just letting us know where you're listening from. If you do that on Instagram or TikTok, just on our next post, just go on and let us know where you're listening from. We'd love to hear. We get little stats on our podcast platform that we put our stuff on. So for instance, this week, while it's loading, we'll have the UK, which is our usual. It's the UK, the US, Belgium, Netherlands, Ireland, France. We've had plenty from Indonesia, India, like all over the world. But we'd love to put Instagram profiles to those countries or whatever you're on. So we'd really love it if you could drop us a wee comment just saying you're listening from the UK or listening from wherever. So thank you all for listening, and we'll speak to you next week after the Canadian Grand Prix.